Kamaru Usman had a piece of advice for the fighting nerds. He said, get a wrestling coach. And I was very interested in this, by the way. The headline comes out, Kamaru Usman has advice for fighting nerds. I'm like, oh, I'd love to hear what Kamaru has to say. And then it was such a simple answer, get a wrestling coach. And when you hear that, you kind of go, yeah. There's really no room to disagree with that. Everybody should have a wrestling coach. I mean, it would just be a fundamental piece. But Kamaru does make a fair point because it's not. Fundamental piece would be have a jiu-jitsu coach. And in some gyms, they'll just call it grappling, but it means jiu-jitsu, right? You're starting on your knees. And why is that? He kind of got me thinking when Kamaru says that. Why is that? First off, there's not a whole lot of wrestling coaches out there. Wrestling is very poorly funded. And there are a number of people that would like to be wrestling coaches. And let's say there's 60 programs in the country. They all, per the rules, get 3 coaches. Well, now you got 180 guys. I mean, of all the people that would like to be a wrestling coach or have ever dreamed of being a wrestling coach, just for example, there's 180 positions. That's it. And then how realistic is that? Hey, I live in Oregon. I want to be a wrestling coach. Well, there are no coaches in Oregon. Okay. Well, I'll move to Kansas. I mean, I'm just saying, like, how realistic is that? Could you get the position, for one, very hard to come by, and then are you willing to move, which is likely going to be the case? I mean, do you see where it's very limited opportunity, very coveted position to have? But who are you going to get to come in and teach wrestling to guys that don't wrestle? Because now you're starting to see what it takes to find a wrestling coach to go into an MMA gym. A wrestling coach, a good one, is going to have dreams. NCAA is going to be number 1. World Olympic Championships are going to be number 2. None of those things are going to happen. Wrestling coach with smaller dreams is going to be a Saturday tournament where I get the guys together and they put on singlets and shoes and they go out there and try to have more points than the other guy. Try to pin him all the way just to the ground. Well, none of those things are going to happen in MMA. As a matter of fact, these guys that you're coaching to wrestle aren't even going to wear wrestling gear. They're not ever going to put a singlet on, which you're used to. They don't even own a pair of shoes. So you start to see that it's a different thing. And it's definitely a void that could be filled. I'm just adding to Kamaru's thought that, yeah, a lot of top gyms don't have wrestling. Wrestling is also very hard to make money with. It's very hard to make money with because it's hard. That is the truth. The truth stops right there. There's not a second and a third and a fourth. It stops right there. The reason any of you did not wrestle, I don't look down on you and I don't condescend, but let's just be real honest with each other. You didn't wrestle because it was hard. There's not a second reason. It's not as though it wasn't available or it cost too much money or you had a different sport going that season. You did not wrestle because it was hard. Why do you respect the wrestlers? Well, you respect them because you saw how hard they work. Now, I only tell you that from a business standpoint. It's very hard. Imagine driving down the road, right? Any business you want. You want Mexican food? Look out your window. You'll pass a Mexican restaurant. You need a dry cleaners? Just keep your eyes open, keep driving. You'll come across a dry cleaners. Any business you can think of is like that, but you've never driven down the road, looked out a window, ever anywhere in your life, and seen a wrestling gym. Never. You have never seen a commercial piece of property in your existence on this earth that coaches wrestling. There is nowhere that you can wrestle outside of an educational institution. Nowhere. So the opportunity does just become very limited. And then what do you want to do? Let's say that you got MMA dreams. You're 26 years old. You're going to have to go into a high school to get a workout. So now your training partners and your peers are 14-year-old kids. You're ranked number 8 in the UFC. You're 26 years old. You're ranked number 8 in the UFC. You fight on pay-per-view. People want your autograph. You could go into your local high school with 14 and 15 and 16-year-olds, and you're going to get your ass kicked. So the answer in MMA? Don't wrestle. You're largely going to get away with that because your partner, or your opponent rather, is probably not wrestling either. We will get MMA guys, and they're great, and they're even great with the wrestling, but they don't wrestle anymore. They used to wrestle. Like the quality of wrestling in MMA is very low. And it's very low because the guys that started either didn't have a wrestling background, they just tried to pick some moves up in a wrestling room, or they used to be really good, but they got into MMA and they don't wrestle anymore. They operate off of residue that remains from their wrestling past. It's very rare that you'll get a guy in MMA that still currently trains in wrestling for two reasons. One, it's hard. And two, you would have to go and work with kids who are going to kick your ass. And that's just a very hard concept for a guy fighting for $1 million on pay-per-view to get around. So when Kamaru says get a wrestling coach, it really does solve a lot of problems. And wrestling is not as complex as you might think. There's 4 positions. That's it. For MMA. For MMA, in everything that you could ever learn in the sport of wrestling, there's only 4 positions. There's a couple of different options from each position. But I could teach you everything that you would ever need to know about wrestling and MMA in one day. That is not an exaggeration. In one day, I could teach you. You're going to need a number of days to understand it, to get it down, and to perfect it, let alone to be able to go out there and to apply it. But I could teach you everything. In fact, I could probably teach you it all in 1 hour. There's not a lot to it, but it's hard and it's grimy, and you're going to need partners, and that's going to be really hard for you to find. You'll find a guy that wants to learn how to punch or throw a kick. You'll find a guy that wants to get on the ground, and he swings his hips this way, and he's got an arm, and he's extended, and oh my God, what a great thing. The wrestling is difficult. The wrestling is important. The wrestling is the in-between. Right? It's in between stand-up fighting and ground fighting, of which are the only 2 positions in MMA. It's the in-between that decides, are we standing up, are we on the ground? And if you ever go to a judge's decision, that is the number one thing that they're going to look for. I know that they tell you they look for damage. They don't. They just say it. They tell you that they look for offensive posture. For things that are looking to finish the fight. That's what they say. They don't. The number one thing that they will look for is who is on top more. You'll have a very hard time going all the way back to 1993 to find a single contest that went to a judge's decision and the winner was not simply the guy that was on top more. You could find it, but I guarantee you don't know it. You're not arguing with me right now. You're not leaving me a comment. You don't know it. You could go and search and you could find it. But the mere fact that you would have to do that, I think, proves my point to how rare it is. And there's a number of countries that don't have wrestling. Brazil does have wrestling, but they're not very good. They don't have much wrestling. The World Championships are going on right now. I watched every session every day. I haven't really slept in about 4 days, and there's 2 days left. I have not seen one single Brazilian. Now, this isn't an insult to Brazil. This is speaking to the reality that finding a wrestling coach is tough to do. Hey, finding any coach is tough to do. You got any interest in Muay Thai? Ask yourself that. Do you like Muay Thai? Okay, great. Well, if you have an interest, it doesn't mean you can go do Muay Thai. Good luck finding a coach. There's very few out there. And so then the idea of getting a coach that's applicable, that's willing to go in the room and work with guys that aren't going to do it. He's never going to get to be in their corner. He's never going to be coaching them on. He's never going to explain to them what parterre is and show them a government. He's never going to have any Olympic goals or aspirations. That very coach is going to have to put his own goals on hold. And then you're talking about doing all of those things I just mentioned and doing it in a country that doesn't really do the sport. Not really. It's tough. I mean, it's a very fair point by Kamaru Usman, as simple as it is. And it's not just the nerds. I mean, this is all over. It's one of the reasons that wrestling doesn't just go out and dominate. Not very many wrestlers that come over to MMA anymore. For one. And for two, the ones that do stop wrestling. They're not very good at it anymore. They used to be good. And I just share with you, like within that statement that Kamaru makes, there is massive opportunity. But massive opportunity is finding that coach, finding the environment, listening to him, being consistent. And if you do all of those things, which is the hardest and most unfun part about the sport, ultimately you're just going to be able to decide, are we on the ground, are we on their feet? Like, it doesn't feel like a big trade until you end up in those close fights that are going to a decision and you realize the judges aren't really looking for damage, they just say they are. They're not looking for fight finishing techniques, they just say that they are. They're not looking for octagon control, they just say that they are. They're looking consciously or subconsciously at one thing: which guy in the last 5 rounds spent more time on top?